Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to part 2 of a meeting I had with one of world Jewry's foremost journalists and authors and thinkers in the Jewish community today, Yossi Klein Halevi, who many of you know from his important work on the history of Israel from the Six-Day War of 1967 to the Yom Kippur War of 1973, and how that span of 6 short years has shaped much of Israeli life today, both politically and socially. Yossi Klein Halevi's book is entitled Like Dreamers, the story of the Israeli paratroopers who reunited Jerusalem and divided a nation. And in part 1 of my meeting with Yossi, we talked about the enormous significance of the Six-Day War of 67 and the miraculous way it transformed Jewish identity, both for Israelis and for diaspora Jewry, and how it literally brought the Jews of the former Soviet Union back to life. But the Six-Day War also resulted in consequences that continue to frame Israeli life today and the way Israel is perceived here in America and throughout the world by bringing the West Bank into Israeli control. In a defensive war of survival in 1967 against the combined Arab forces of Egypt, Syria, Jordan, and a number of other Arab states, Israel defended itself by destroying the Egyptian and Syrian air forces and by pushing the Syrians off the Golan Heights from where they had mercilessly been unceasingly bombarding the Israeli towns and kibbutzim in the Hula Valley below. Israel drove the Egyptians off the Sinai Peninsula, reopened the Straits of Tiran, which Abdul Nasser had closed in convention of international law, pushed Egypt out of the Gaza Strip, and despite repeated, unheeded pleas to the king of Jordan not to enter the war, they wound up pushing Jordan off the West Bank, which Jordan had occupied illegally since the end of the War of Israel's independence in 1948-49, and then also liberated the old city of Jerusalem, which had been under Jordanian control since the end of the 48-49 war, and which had been closed to Jews and Christians alike. In this context, in a defensive war of survival, Israel found itself administering the West Bank. And from 1967 till today, every attempt Israel has made to leave the West Bank by creating an Arab entity on that land has been summarily rebuffed by the Arab world. Most notably, in September of 1967, only 2 months after Israel had won the Six-Day War, when the Arab League gathered in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, to consider Israel's offer to withdraw from virtually all of the West Bank on the condition that the Arab League declare its war to destroy Israel was over. And the Arab League issued a simple statement that can be summarized in 6 tragic words: no peace, no recognition, no negotiation. And so the West Bank has remained under Israeli administration to this day, 60 years after the end of the Six-Day War. It's now called an occupation. Israel is vilified as a brutal occupier of the West Bank and of the Palestinian people who live there. And Israel is routinely portrayed as the bad guy, and why no two-state solution has been achieved. This is the context of my ongoing discussion with author journalist Yossi Klein Halevi, who's also doing wonderful work as a senior fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And Yossi co-directs the Hartman Institute's Muslim Leadership Initiative with Abdullah Antepeli of Duke University. On L'chaim, here is part 2 of my meeting with Yossi Klein Halevi. We've talked about Israel. You've talked about the power of the Six-Day War and that it has created a problem. And the problem is, what do we do with the West Bank? And what I hear you're saying is, we do the best we can to find people in the Palestinian world who want peace with us. We stay vigilant at the same time. And I guess I didn't ask you this question. What do you want to do about the settlements that are there?
Well, before I answer that, let me just go back to a point you raised about looking for partners among the Palestinians. I don't believe that it's possible in this generation for Israel and the Palestinian leadership to negotiate an agreement.
Say it again.
I don't believe that in this generation, Israel and the Palestinian leadership will be able to negotiate an agreement. Because the Palestinian leadership is either too divided or too ideologically opposed to our existence, or too cowardly or too weak, whatever the reasons are, and I think it's a combination. I don't believe that we will have a partner for ending this conflict. Where does that leave me then? Two places. One is the goal should not be a comprehensive solution to this problem. There is no comprehensive solution to the refugee problem, to Jerusalem. How could Israel redivide Jerusalem and risk a Hamas takeover in East Jerusalem? It's simply inconceivable, and we're not going to do it. So, and the Palestinian leadership is not going to give us the compromise we need on refugee return, which is descendants of Palestinian refugees go back to their homeland, which is a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. They do not go back to the literal homes of their great-grandparents, which in many cases don't exist anymore. That is not a right of return that we will accept. So we can't give them East Jerusalem. They can't give us what we need on refugees. There's no comprehensive agreement. But maybe there is room for a long-term interim agreement with input from the region, from the Saudis, from the Egyptians, the Jordanians. Maybe. It's a long shot. But that is the thinking in the government, in the Israeli government.
What would
today.
that look like?
Well, it's a good question. I think that, and this goes now in terms of settlements, I think it would mean uprooting some of the settlements that are deep in Judea and Samaria. And by the way, for me, it's not the West Bank.
Yeah,
it's Judea and Samaria.
It is for you, isn't it?
It's very much. I'm home there, and I love Judea and Samaria, and there is no place I feel more at home as a Jew in than in Hebron, much more than in Tel Aviv.
Interesting.
So it will necessitate, and I say this with anguish, the thought of uprooting Jews from their homes. There are now 3 generations
And the
of
reason
Judean
the
and
reason to
Samaritans.
do it is?
There's another people living there that I do not want to permanently control.
Okay, but the people who are settlers, the settlers who live, well, they're not, the communities that are living in Judea, Samaria, whether it's Ariel, Ma'ale Adumim, whether it's Kiryat Arba, whether it's the Jewish section that's outside the main city of Hebron, they're not creating problems for Palestinians. They're not making Palestinians' lives in any, they're not touching
Well, first of all,
Palestinians' lives.
you've put in one category lots of different
Yes,
kinds
because,
of
and you've got to
settlements.
deal with that. Because it's
they're
interesting
different.
how you're
different.
They're not different conceptually.
Ma'ale Adumim is different from Yitzhar because Ma'ale Adumim is near the border.
Not to the Palestinian.
Listen,
if your goal...
Of course, it is different for the Palestinians, because the fact that we need to put roadblocks all over Judea and Samaria has to do with the fact that we have settlements all over in areas that we shouldn't have built. And you can concentrate 3/4 of the settlements along the 67 border, which is the Clinton proposals from December 2000. And that, to my mind, is still the most workable plan. And
you understand, it's workable to you. It's not workable to the Palestinian Authority.
In the end, it's not workable to the Palestinian Authority as a final agreement. I'm not looking for a final agreement. I don't believe in a final agreement.
I'm only saying the minute anybody says, and I'm in very much the quandary you identified. I love the way you say it, but there is a heart and mind here somewhat in conflict. But at the same time, I don't kid myself, and you don't kid yourself, that what you want to win by taking down a settlement in Judea, Samaria, unless your only argument is, I don't want there to be a roadblock anywhere in the land.
No,
but
of course not.
If you're, except for that argument, I don't understand what you win by telling people who are living in Ariel they can't stay in Ariel.
Look,
but they can stay in Ma'ale Adumim.
Yeah.
And the Palestinian says you don't belong in either place. Mm-hmm. The Palestinian says I want East Jerusalem back. Well, the United States says East Jerusalem is now a settlement. Our government has said that.
The Palestinian media says Tel Aviv is a settlement.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so I know what I'm dealing with. I understand.
So
but I also have I have several interests here. One interest is not to go back to the 67 lines, not to uproot hundreds of thousands of settlers. The second interest is to begin extricating myself from ruling over the Palestinians. And it's not just a moral issue, it's also a security issue for me. It's also an issue of saving Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, and that's not just an abstraction. Saving Israel as a Jewish and democratic state is, for me, a primary security goal. Because if Israel loses either its Jewish identity or its democratic identity, something fundamental in Israel will be forfeited, and we will lose a large part of Jewish identification with Israel, including among many Israelis. And I can't risk that. Israel must remain a Jewish majority democratic state. And if I have to take severe measures, extremely painful measures, and one of the complaints that I have about the Israeli left and the Jewish left here in America is the cavalier way they talk about withdrawal. We're talking about destroying communities that have, in principle, every right to be there. And thriving Jewish communities, I don't take this lightly. Mm-hmm. And it's a nightmare for me. And I'll go even further and say, I deeply fear a two-state solution. I don't want a two-state solution.
Interesting. Because?
Because I don't trust the Palestinians to be good neighbors. I don't trust the Palestinian national movement to recognize my legitimacy, because it's going to open up a nightmarish security dilemma for Israel, the loss of our ability to control terrorism in the territories, because I don't see how do you unite Gaza and the West Bank. There are so many issues. So I fear and dread and in some ways loathe a two-state solution. The only thing that I fear more than a two-state solution is a one-state solution. A one-state solution for me is a guaranteed unraveling of Israel, God forbid. A two-state solution, it's an enormous gamble. And my starting point is expect the worst.
Well, you don't have to worry about either at the moment, do you?
I don't know. Your president is getting involved in peacemaking and thinks that...
you and I are about the same age. We've seen president after president after president say they're going to solve this problem.
You know what I remember? A few months after Obama became president, first term, 2008, there was a headline in Yediot Achronot, one of the Israeli dailies. Rahm Emanuel, whether Israelis like it or not, there will be a Palestinian state by the end of Obama's first term. And I looked at that and I said, here we go again. Here we go again. Now, I'll tell you what I appreciate in Trump's approach. Now, I should preface this by saying I really understand American Jewish angst and fear of the lack of civility that the Trump administration has brought into political culture.
We both do.
I understand that and respect it.
At the same time, by the way, it's not universal, even in the Jewish community.
It isn't universal.
But go ahead.
Okay, it isn't universal, but I understand that, and I deeply sympathize with that fear and deep resentment for the red lines that Trump crossed in the election campaign. But at the same time, from where I'm sitting in the Middle East, Trump is certainly an improvement over the last 8 years of Obama.
Isn't that ironic?
Oh, I mean, first of all, he has changed the culture in the UN, and he has thrown the gauntlet, and he has let the UN know that lynch mob season against Israel is over. Why couldn't Obama, our good friend Obama, who kept telling us how he's got our back, why didn't he do that? Why didn't Samantha Power do it? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that Trump has reversed the Obama doctrine, which was never made explicit, but I think if you read between the lines, it was there, which is seeing that Obama saw Iran as a potential regional stabilizer. Trump has restored Iran to its proper role as the regional threat. There's no more delusion about Iran. So from where I'm sitting, those are two extraordinary gifts that we've gotten just in the last couple of months. And the other piece of this that if I can just to conclude is that in terms of the peace process, you know, when Trump said 2 states, 1 state, whatever they want, and people made fun of him here, my response as an Israeli was, he got that exactly right. Whatever the region wants, they'll have to live with it. We can't force this down their throats. Obama, who had all of the ideological certainties that he brought to the peace process, presided over the destruction of the Middle East. That's the legacy of the last 8 years. So Trump is coming in with uncharacteristic humility in this particular area, and I very much appreciated that. And so my feeling is, if he's able to continue to say, well, in the end, it's what these guys want, because the Arabs and the Jews, they're going to have to live with this. I can try, make a deal. Then maybe we'll be able to get to the point where we'll all sit around a table and say, okay, we're not going to reach a utopian peace. There's no just and lasting
Yes, you
peace
made that
here.
clear.
But let's see, we got a guy here who talks about a deal. Let's see what kind of a deal we can make.
But will you make a deal if there's something of interest and need in both sides? What's the interest, self-interest for Abbas and the Palestinian Authority?
I don't know that they have an interest.
Isn't that sad?
Yes, it really is sad. But the Arab world has an interest in downplaying the Palestinian issue for a very simple reason. If they are serious, and we don't know yet how serious they are, but if they are really serious about creating a united front strategic front with Israel against Iran. Look, Iran is devouring one Arab country after another. There are 4 Arab countries that are now effectively controlled by Iran. There's Lebanon through Hezbollah, there's Syria, there's Iraq, and there's Yemen through the Houthis. The Arab world is petrified, not of Israel, of Iran. So if the Arab world really is serious about a strategic relationship with Israel, then we will together need to tone down the Palestinian issue, because that keeps things riled up in the Arab world. So
are you saying the Arab world might put a lid on what
the
Palestinians do?
The old conventional wisdom used to be that the international community will need to pressure Israel to make a deal. I think that it's the Palestinian leadership that will need to be pressured.
Absolutely.
And maybe the Arab world can play a role here. Now, this is all speculation. This all could just turn out to be smoke. But is there a chance for this? Is this a moment in the history of the Middle East that's worth exploring? Of course it is.
In the meantime, tomorrow, the next 6 months, assuming that even if Trump wants to make a deal, there's no deal here. And at the moment, the settlements do exist. When people say, isn't it the status quo? Isn't that just the answer at the moment?
Look, I believed in the status quo for the last decade. I was an ardent champion.
You've been courageous saying that. You have been courageous.
But now I'm taking it back.
Okay.
And I feel that the status quo is not sustainable.
What's the alternative? That's all.
Well, that's why I want us to explore, with the good offices of your president, who's about to come to the region.
As we meet.
That's great.
But
let's try it.
Because Israel feels what? Left and right about Trump?
First of all, Israel feels left and right about America. And that is a deep love and gratitude for America. And whoever sits there, we have to deal with. And look, for all of the tensions between Netanyahu and Obama, if you look at the statements Netanyahu made over the years about Obama, our great friend, he may not have meant it, but because it's the President of the United States, it transcends the character.
Fair enough.
So, and in terms of Trump, actually, yeah, I think the left is looking at Trump, parts of the left in Israel, and saying, nothing has worked so far. Maybe it'll take this wild man to shake things up, and if he's really willing, if he's mad enough to say, I'm going to give this another try, let's give it a try. And on the right, there's a lot of warm feelings for Trump. Trump invited settler leaders to his inauguration. Trump has made clear that settlements are not the main obstacle to peace. So I think there's a lot of interest in Israel about what this unpredictable guy is going to do.
And you would agree, settlements are not the...
Of course not.
Of course not. Of course. Okay, we're almost out of time. I want your reaction at the moment to what American Jews are just focusing on, and the sky is falling. The BDS movement, particularly on college campuses, but it reflects something, a mood, throughout Europe, etc. I want to know what Yossi Klein Halevi feels about the BDS movement in particular, and in some way, what those who support J Street here in America, how do you react to that, and what would you say to America? We have American Jewry watching you right now.
Well,
what would you say?
I'll start with J Street. I'm not at all a fan. I have deep anger toward the role that J Street played in the Iran deal. We could talk about that for the next hour. The tactics that J Street used, I feel that J Street was not being straight in various ways. And generally, J Street was, positioned itself as the opposite of AIPAC, and it is the opposite of AIPAC, but not in the way that J Street meant. AIPAC is the American Jewish Community's lobby to the White House, J Street was the White House's lobby to the American Jewish community. And I think the White House should have taken care of itself and didn't need a Jewish organization to do its dirty work, especially on Iran. At the same time, for all of the anger that I feel toward J Street, I will not excommunicate them. They are part of my community. They're part of my conversation. I have every right to criticize them in the same way that they have every right to criticize the state of Israel. They use that right liberally, and I feel that I have the right, the moral right, to reciprocate, to return the compliment. And my criticisms of J Street, as I say, are deep. I have appreciation for some of the young people in J Street. When I go speak on campuses, I meet J Street kids, and for a young person to identify with J Street on a college campus is actually a pro-Israel move. And a lot of the J Street critics don't understand that. And so, for example, when Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL spoke at J Street U, and he made that clear distinction, I'm speaking to the young people of J Street, I thought that was exactly the right distinction to make. So that's in terms of J Street. Now, I would not include Jewish Voice for Peace, which is anti-Zionist, which is pro-BDS. They are not part of my community. They are not part of my conversation. And I return the compliment of boycott. I boycott them, and they need to be kept beyond the pale. And I say that about them as an organization. I don't feel that way necessarily about individuals. You know, in the same way that I will have friends across the spectrum, left, right. I'm ready. I do not make or break friendships based on political positions. But in terms of where the Jewish people as a community needs to draw its borders, every community is defined by its borders. J Street is in. It may be on the border, but it's in. For me, J Street is the equivalent of the ZOA. And you've got the ZOA is the farthest legitimate right in the Jewish community. Beyond the ZOA, you've got the Kahanists, who to my mind are not legitimate part of the conversation in the way that anyone who advocates violence against innocent Arab Israelis, for example, in the case of the Kahanists, is not part of a mainstream Jewish conversation, and Jewish Voice for Peace, which advocates boycott of Israel.
What makes, in your mind, the ZOA comparable
to J Street?
Yes, just on the other side.
Well, in the sense of these are two organizations that don't see themselves under the broad tent of AIPAC, for example. And so what that means to me is you are
I'm not sure that's true.
With the ZOA?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, Mort Klein's at AIPAC all the time.
Well, Sheldon Adelson pulled out of AIPAC.
That's Sheldon Adelson. It's not
okay,
ZOA.
So if the ZOA is part of the Big
Yes,
Ten, then okay. But I ideologically, J Street and the ZOA, for me, define the goalposts.
Yes, if you mean, yeah, it's interesting. When you talk to ZOA, it's very hard to find a position that would be far to the right of you. Very hard.
Oh,
give me one. Give me one.
No to a two-state solution. That's.
You already told me that in the state of Israel, that the number of people who are no two-state solution is growing significantly.
Yes.
That doesn't make the Israelis who feel that way on the far extreme right.
It makes them on the hard right. Now, I don't think that J Street is extreme left. Jewish Voice for Peace is extreme left. J Street is hard left.
Wait,
ZOA is hard right.
So far, you've identified J Street as supporting the Iran deal, lobbying for the Iran deal. J Street said that Resolution 2334 was appropriate. I don't see how you can compare that to anything that ZOA does.
Okay. In the 1990s, during the Oslo process, the ZOA, if I remember correctly, lobbied Congress against the Rabin government. Now, that to me is a red line, whether it comes from the left, when J Street does it, or the ZOA does it. And again, that doesn't put the ZOA outside the pale of the Jewish community any more than it puts J Street outside the pale.
No, but what it does
But
is,
it makes me very angry
yes,
at both of them.
And the real problem here is, and I know what I'm going to hear from people who have great respect for ZOA. You have, in one instance, a group which may be strong in its positions in defense of the state of Israel. You have another group who is strong in opposing not only what the Israeli government is doing.
Here's the problem, Mark, is that the Jewish people today is divided emotionally between two forms of anguish that both come from the Six-Day War. Let's bring this full circle.
Yes,
back
I
to the
was
Six-Day
going to
War.
say to you, we have to come back.
Okay, so there is the camp that feels outrage that Israel still has to defend its right to exist, that the Jewish people can't take its legitimacy for granted in this world, that Israel is judged more harshly than any country on the planet. And that's one source of deep anguish within the Jewish people. There's the other source of deep anguish is 50 years of ruling over another people, and with no end in sight, and the seeming ease with which so many Israelis and some American Jews have gotten used to this situation. And so the anguish that that camp feels is an anguish at the seeming lack of anguish that so many Jews feel toward ruling over the Palestinians. Now, these are two, I've just defined two camps.
They're not equivalent.
Now, it's you know, when I look at the Jewish people, here's the thing. When I travel around the American Jewish community, I often speak to right-wing communities and I speak to liberal communities. And I hear the same thing wherever I go, which is, don't you understand? What the right means, don't you understand, is look at the Palestinian leadership, look at the Middle East, look what Israel's up against. How could you talk about peace and a two-state solution? When I hear it from the left, don't you understand? What they're saying is, don't you understand that that another 50 years of ruling over the Palestinians will destroy Israel as a Jewish and democratic state? And my response to both the left and the right is, I understand. I understand both of your arguments, which is why I'm a centrist, because I've internalized these two sources of anguish so that they're arguing inside of me.
Okay, how would you define me?
I don't know.
I'm going to tell you where I stand, then I want to hear what Yossi Klein Halevi would say. I have argued for years and years and years that since 1938, the Jewish community said, although the entire land, Jabotinsky was right, the entire land, both sides of the Jordan, was given to us by the League of Nations in a juridical fashion under international law. We have a right to this. It was guaranteed to us, although that was done in 1922, etc. In 1938, the British come and say to the Jews of Palestine, the Arab world will never accept you here unless we partition the land. Will you share the land with the Palestinian, with the Arab? It wasn't Palestinian yet. And the Jewish community, which was pained by this, that already lost Transjordan when Churchill lopped it off, although they were pained by it, they said yes, we will share the land from the Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. In 47, the partition plan was reaffirmed. The Jews said again, we will share the land. The Arabs said in 38, over my dead body. The Arabs said in 47, over my dead body. In 1948, the Arab tried to make good on that. It was going to be the dead bodies of the new Israelis. In 67, the exact same thing. They go to Khartoum over my dead body. In 73, they tried to take it, and ultimately there was a compromise where Israel, as you say, it wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Israel actually won the 73 war, and we've moved on. There was Oslo. There was 2000. There was 2008. Every single time the Jew has said, we will share the land, and the Palestinian has now answered, over my dead body. I'm almost done.
So far, we're on the same wavelength.
In addition, most of our viewers have to be reminded over and over again, PLO does not stand for Palestinian Liberation Organization. It stands for Palestine Liberation Organization. It was there to liberate Palestine.
And it was founded before
1964, before we ever touched our foot on the West Bank. This has nothing to do with the West Bank or borders or settlements, nothing. Okay. I've been for the two-state solution because my people, not Mark Golub, David Ben-Gurion, and every Israeli that's come.
Are you still for a two-state solution?
Just a minute. Yes.
Okay.
Of course I am. I believe every Jew should say, of course. It's been the Jewish position from day 1930.
Well, it's been the majority position. It has not been.
It has been the. There has never been.
The camp that I grew up in. I grew up in Beitar.
You were not represented.
We were not pro-partition.
You were not the Yeshuv.
Right.
You were not the Jewish agency.
Right.
You did not have power. The power in the Jewish world has said from 38 till today, we will share the land. I disagree with you, and you look. I don't live in Israel, but Israelis are in that chair all the time. I haven't found one yet, not one, who says to me, "Yeah, if they want to make peace, I'd have no interest." I meet every one of them says to me, "Well, if they really meant it, yeah," but I don't believe they mean it. They say to me, "I don't believe there's anybody there," and we've tried. We're not occupying a land because we want to. We're occupying a land because we have to.
So what's your position in that?
My position is that they're right. That they're right. We will still want a two-state solution. It resonates with me when you say, we will pursue peace. Yes, I argue all the time. You never stop. But don't put your head in the sand. And don't lie. Don't lie.
That we're in the same camp.
And don't lie. And the lie is, and this is what bothers me, and here we don't agree. It's a lie to say we're occupying because we want to. It's not about 50 years. You've occupied a land 50 years. We've occupied it because we've had no choice.
I agree with you.
Okay, therefore,
Mark,
the left and the right. No, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Then you can tell me you agree.
But tell me where we disagree.
Here's where we disagree. The left and the right are not equal. The group who says, I don't want to give up the land unless I know it's 100% safe or 90% safe.
You have to make a distinction.
As opposed to those who say.
Okay, you have to make a distinction on the right. There's two rights. There's not one right. There's the pragmatic right, and there is the hard ideological right.
Okay.
The pragmatic right is that force which has always withdrawn.
Right.
Every withdrawal comes from the right.
Isn't that
doesn't come from the left.
You're right.
But it is always the ideological right, mostly the religious right,
that's not
which
ZOA.
opposes a withdrawal. Whatever every withdrawal, whether it was
Begin's
withdrawal, Sharon's withdrawal, every
Yes,
withdrawal is opposed. It divides the right. It doesn't divide left versus right.
You're right. Because there is, on the far right, a religious right.
Not far right.
It's the religious right.
It's the mainstream religious right.
It's the religious right.
Okay, it's Bennett. It's the National Religious Party, which now calls itself
Jewish Home.
The Jewish Home. And to my mind, the ZOA is in that camp. If they're not, then I'm very happy to hear that.
And I don't want to hear Yossi Klein Halevi make an equivalency between J Street, which says, why are you're occupying for 50 years, as if it's something you chose, Yossi. You're an Israeli. Everybody I put in that chair, former IDF soldiers, young people.
I make the equivalency ideologically. Yes, I do. Because these are the way that I understand ZOA. And ZOA doesn't matter, really. I'm talking about, and J Street doesn't matter. I'm talking about two sensibilities, two camps. And these two camps, which basically say, no matter what, we have our head in the sand and we deny reality. Let me put it to you this way. The Zionist revolution set out to free the Jews from a politics of fantasy, of being Luftmenschen. When you're powerless, when you're in exile for 2,000 years, you lose your ability to live in the real world. There's a reason why so many young Jews became communists in the 19th and early 20th century, because we didn't have a mature relationship to politics. And so we had these utopian ideas of politics. Zionism, one of the psychological greatness of Zionism, was to insist to the Jewish people that we need a politics of realism. What happened in 1967 is that with all of the blessings that 1967 gave us, there was a curse. And the curse was it reintroduced a certain politics of fantasy in the Jewish people, a temptation of a politics of fantasy on the left and the right. The politics of fantasy on the left was peace now. It's all up to us. If we have the power, 1967 proved we're powerful, so we can impose peace. The fantasy on the right was, if it's all ours, then it doesn't matter that there's another people there. A, they're not a real people, and I hear this all the time on the right, and ZOA too. There's no such thing as a Palestinian people. They're an invented people. Well, yeah, they are an invented people, but you know what? The definition of peoplehood is a group that decides to invent itself. Every people is invented. So the Palestinians invented themselves later in history. So of course they're invented. We're an invented people too. America is an invented. Every people is an invented construct. That's the definition of a people. So, but what you'll hear on the right is there's no Palestinian people. And what occupation? We're not occupying. There's a Palestinian Authority. Well, are we preventing them from becoming a sovereign state? The answer is yes. The answer also is I don't apologize for preventing them from becoming a sovereign state, because I repeatedly offered them statehood and they rejected it and responded with terrorism. So I don't feel guilty. But am I preventing them? Of course I am. So this notion of denial, there's a certain politics of denial that has set in Jewish discourse on both the left and the right, and I hear it all the time. Look at the organization called If Not Now, When? What a stupid name for an organization that you look at the Middle East today and you're saying, if not now, exactly what do you mean, if not now? This is the moment when you want to create another dysfunctional Arab state that's going to be 2 minutes away from Tel Aviv and inside Jerusalem? How do you think that's going to work out? If not now, when what? What then? What happens after the now? What happens the day after now when we create a Palestinian state? So this idiotic denial on the left is matched by an idiotic denial on the right. I am an occupier of 2+ million Palestinians because I personally was an occupier. I served in the territories. I served in the First Intifada, in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria. I know what it looks like. I know what it's like to break into somebody's home at 2 in the morning and we're either looking for a terrorist suspect or maybe somebody who didn't pay his water bill and the authorities are afraid to go into a refugee camp, so send in the army at 2 in the morning to be the policeman or the tax collector. I know what an occupation looks like. So don't tell me sitting in Teaneck that there's no such thing as an occupation, and don't tell me sitting in Berkeley, if not now, when. That's what I mean by a politics of fantasy. Did I get angry enough? Did I get worked up enough?
You're wonderful. Do I love you? I love you so much.
Well, Mark, it's just a delight to be with you.
You're out of this world. Kol tuva hatzlacha. You just keep plugging away, writing away. I'm thrilled for you that the Like Dreamers will now be in Hebrew, and it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is by those who haven't read it yet in English. But keep writing, keep speaking. There's no one like you. Thank you for being here. Yossi Klein Halevi, brilliant journalist, author, analyst, commentator, one of the most brilliant on the world Jewish scene today. And again, his 2013 classic is entitled Like Dreamers, the story of the Israeli paratroopers who reunited Jerusalem and divided a nation. You know, usually it takes a generation or two for a book to become a classic. This is a classic immediately. And I hope if you haven't read it, whether you read it in English or Hebrew, you pick it up. It widens and broadens understanding and appreciation. And what better time as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the things you heard Yossi or I say on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.